I'm being joined right now by the production designer for A Complete Unknown, François Audouy. François, thank you so much for joining me here to talk about your latest work.
Well, nice to be here.
Yeah,
Happy to chat
ab-
with you.
absolutely. Because you're being tasked to recreate in a very grounded and authentic manner um, locales that, quite frankly, still exist, but obviously the times they haven't changed,
Mhm.
and so you have to transport us back to these places that people are very familiar with. I mean, Bob Dylan is like one of the most studied and beloved music artists in history. So when you think on like the photographs from that era and what that time period was like for American folk music, do you yourself have any kind of like personal connection to that era and to the music of that time?
Well, it's a little bit, it's before my generation. It's before my
Yeah.
time. I was born in 1974. So,
Okay.
but, um, but, I remember a time that was more that even like early 80s and the late 70s, it was different than the world that we live in today. And that today, everyone is distracted by screens and distracted by technology and computers. And I think what's beautiful about this movie is it recreates a world where people connected with one another. They were connected
Hmm.
to their community, and they were connected to the businesses and that fill their communities. And there was like, especially in Greenwich Village, there was this real bucolic community spirit of artists and sculptors and jazz musicians and poets all living in close proximity to one another, and this connection. And I think that that's something very beautiful that we had an opportunity to convey in Jim's movie.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that. When you were approached about doing the project, what did you already look at on paper and say to yourself, oh, that's going to be a challenge?
Well, it was I always feel like a tremendous responsibility, and I think there's a certain amount of fear when you sign on to a project like this, where you're like, for me anyway, I was like, oh my God, like I can't fuck this up. This is a huge responsibility to tell Bob Dylan's story and to make sure it's authentic and true. I guess that's what you're trying to find, is you're trying to find the truth, and you're trying to get at what's below the surface of the coffee table books that anybody can buy at the bookstore, to what the underlying sort of feeling is of this world, and to recreate it so that you are just washed over, this world washes over, and you're just in it. You're just in it, and you believe it, and you believe Timmy is Bob Dylan, and you believe these characterizations in these places, and to do that, to make it the effect where it's like it just feels like you haven't done anything except go into a time machine, actually requires a lot of work, and um, a lot of work and sensitivity to the details.
Yeah, I can imagine as such. Ford v Ferrari, one of your previous collaborations with Mangold on, covers a pretty, I think, significant overlap of time in that early 60s
Yeah,
period.
yeah.
Was there anything from that project that you were able to instantly kind of carry over? I know there are different locales and such,
Yeah,
but I have to imagine that it was good primer for getting ready for this.
it was a West Coast version of some of the overlapping years for sure, a little bit later. But
Hmm.
one thing that I've learned about the 1960s is that the 1960s is there's a lot of change from year to year. And in fact, the I think the 1960s is actually 2 decades. The early
Hmm.
1960s is still the late 1950s.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of the 1950s, like 1961 is still the 1950s to me. It's
Mhm.
still, American Graffiti, the film American Graffiti is set in 1962, but it feels like a 1950s movie. I mean, it feels like the 1950s. Um, and if you look at the early scenes in Ford versus Ferrari, you still feel the 1950s. I think that's what's authentic about that time. then what's particularly fascinating about A Complete Unknown, I think, is that you're actually witnessing the birth of the 1950s, 60s that we think of when we say the
Yeah.
1960s, and with the color and the music and the tremendous cultural, musical, artistic change that happened in America. You're actually thinking of, like, after the Beatles were on Sullivan, and you're thinking of, everything after 1964,
Yeah.
65, 66. And each of those years, it was like the amount of change was staggering. If you listen to the top 10 Billboard top 10 songs each year, it's staggering the change that's happening creatively and musically across that time. And so what was what was really a challenge and inspiring about this movie is that we got to tell the story of that change and Bob Dylan's central role in sparking that change in America uh, through his engagement with uh, Greenwich Village and through his being inspired by the people and the artists who were in Greenwich Village in that place, and how he inspired them in return.
Right, right. I usually will ask somebody like, what is the most challenging this, challenging that, and so on and so forth. I want to know from your perspective, which set that you worked on is the most underappreciated.
Well, I don't know if it's under, well, I mean, I think that when you when you do an apartment building, an apartment,
Hmm.
I guess you don't get the credit of the amount of work that you can go into just doing a studio apartment. But like we
Well, you have to
decided,
fill it up with all the little tiny details that may or
right,
may not make it into the film.
right. But for example, Bob's apartment is a very um it's an extension of his character that's so profound because it's has to communicate this character's backstory and everything that happened before the scenes that are written in the script. And you have
Hmm.
to do that. You have to debate every object that goes into that room, every paint finish, every floor, the floors, the windows, the kitchen. All of these choices say something about his character. And very
Hmm.
much like his apartment is like a costume, I think, in that once he inhabits his apartment, it 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 says something about his character, and it affects uh, it affects his well, it affects his performance, but it also changes you when you walk into Bob Dylan's apartment and you look out the windows and you can see the neighbors for real, and you can turn on the stove and make a coffee and dry the dishes and run the water for a tub, and it's completely interactive, and you can use the typewriter and put music on the record player that he actually had. It's really like um profound. I think it feels like you're there. Like Regina and I, we went to so much care into this space that we were able to have Timmy and Elle walk through the space a week before we shot to make sure that they were familiar and that they understood and could participate also in the choices that we were making in the space. We had over 200 photos that we went through. We actually found all the negatives. Bob Dylan's manager got us all the negatives from the photographers who shot Bob in his apartment in the early
Hmm.
1960s. And we forensically went through and recreated everything on his walls, the artwork, the oil paintings, um, the his even his stuffed animal, the weird stuffed animal he had, the handmade furniture, the bedspread, the chair was recreated. It was kind of obsessive, but I think it really paid off because it's that space in particular I felt was a completely plausible and um, representation of this young kid and his first apartment, uh,
Yeah, totally.
and this kid who didn't really know how to make coffee or cook a meal. He's got Chinese food and dirty plates and dirty dishes. And he's I think for me he became very relatable once you saw him in his space.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that a lot of these locations are still around today. Were there any locations that you were able to go to for the production and dress up to their former self, or did you have to create everything from scratch?
Well, we shot the outside of the Hotel Chelsea. We were able to work with them, and we had tremendous access on that whole street to shoot the Chelsea and make it look like what it looked like in the 1960s.
I was going to say,
Um,
what's like the Herculean effort that goes into doing that? Because I can't even imagine the stuff you have to either take out of frame or make sure you don't shoot it, but it's still there because you can't
well,
like completely dismantle a street.
well, the thing is like, you can't dismantle a street, but you have to cover up. There's so many things that there's so much detritus in a street now, wires and cables and high-speed internet cables and lines and satellite dishes and telephone boxes and GAC and stuff that you have to hide, PVC downspouts and terrible LED signage and horrible window coverings. And um, I mean, we had pages and pages and pages of notes just to recreate McDougal Street in the Village. It was actually, we took over 2 blocks in Jersey City to make that happen. And a lot of the businesses turned into interior exterior dressed locations. And it was a lot. Half the work is removing removing things, and then you start adding. But first you have to remove everything that's not right, and then you have to add things to make it more authentic and real. And so it becomes a Herculean effort. And then the other thing that we wanted to do is this. I don't know if you saw the movie, but it has lots and lots of texture, and the
Yeah.
texture is kind of a signature visual aesthetic that we tried to carry through the entire movie. But there's lots of layers of paint and peeling and rust and age and the feeling. You can still feel the prior businesses and the ghost signage and the layers beneath the new signage. And everything's handmade, hand painted, hand lettering on the windows. And just lots and lots and lots of layers. It takes time, but it's fun to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. I have seen the film, by the way, and like one of my favorite qualities about it is how transportive it feels. But I think a lot of that also has to do with the film's pacing and how it does almost feel like a laid back vibes film, if you will, at times. Heck, even the concert scenes, I feel like I'm watching almost full concerts at times, and it really
Yeah,
lets you immerse yourself in the environments that
yeah,
you and your team have created. I
yeah.
want to
What's
know
unusual is
because, yeah,
Jim actually lets a lot of these performances run for their entirety, where most times you just get snippets or clips from performances. He lets the whole thing run, and so it feels like a concert film, and also feels like a musical. Um,
hmm
and the reason though is because a lot of the narrative is portrayed through the dialogue, through the how he curated the song selections to, and the words that are in the songs actually tell you a lot about what's happening. If it's a nuance that I think is really interesting.
I completely agree with you. Yeah. One of the things that, we talk to production designers pretty frequently here, but there's a whole team I know that also works with you that sometimes don't get a chance to be on these interviews with us. I want to know like who were like the unsung people that you want to give a shout out to that were huge collaborators with you on this.
Well, my set decorator, Regina Graves, is just an absolute tour. She's like, just I can't say enough good things about her. And in New York, set decorators have even more responsibility than anywhere else in North America. They have to do they're in charge of the tile work and the linoleum and the a lot of the extra finishes that happen in construction. That, or like on the West Coast, that construction would normally do. Um, so she was really my right hand on this movie. We worked very closely together to create the look and the layering that I think makes the movie work so well.
Yeah.
And she has a team of buyers and assistant set decorators who collaborate with her. And we had over 75 sets in this movie, so they're all in different places. And she has an incredible trust in her team, where their advanced teams are out dressing sets without her. Uh, my supervising art director was also an incredible collaborator and a huge resource for me, Christopher Morris. He has to, the supervising art director has to figure out how. Like I dream crazy stuff up, and then he actually has to figure out, well, how are we going to do this, and then assign the resources and the time to that. And he made it look effortless. And it was we had a pretty small art department in this film, but
Hmm.
it was we had a 4-person graphics team, because we literally had we probably had thousands of signs that we had to do, all done in in the computer to resemble hand painted signage, and then their painters on set would paint additional brushstrokes on top of that for some or recreate them entirely. If they were close up, they would be completely repainted. But the graphics team was run by William Hopper, who was absolutely tremendous. And yeah, I mean, it's this, and then the entire construction team. I mean, it's a big department, because it's all, and I like films where there isn't the siloing of like, oh, that's not my responsibility or my department. So everybody's very involved and hands. I really encourage collaboration. And so it was a real team effort and a labor of love, really, which is perhaps a cliche, but everyone fell in love with this world, the world of the early 1960s and the world of Bob Dylan, and the feeling that it portrayed of community and of artistry and of young people um, who were involved and listening and paying attention, and ultimately learning that they could change the world with their involvement in their music and their art.
Yeah. As we come to the end here, over a decade of working with James across 4 films, 2 of them set in the world of X-Men, then Ford v Ferrari, and now A Complete Unknown. How has your working relationship changed over the last 15 years or whatever it is or so?
Um, the I think what I love about working with Jim is that it hasn't changed, and he hasn't changed. He's still a classicist at heart, a classical filmmaker,
Hmm.
very poised and very collaborative. He trusts me, gives me a lot of trust and a lot of freedom um, to, and I think that's what I value the most, is that he gives me just a lot of freedom to explore and to come to him with all kinds of ideas. And but we have what I love about working with Jim too is that he surrounds himself with a core team who have all worked with him for a long time. His costume designer, his director of photography, um, and so there's like this shorthand and this trust, and there's also like this. There aren't barriers. We have, he gives us license to comment and to give feedback and to come up with ideas. And Faden's, giving production design notes, and I might have a, reference that relates to lighting. And there's not, a filmmaking, um, it's not filmmaking where you have a crew with lots of people with agendas. We're all just trying to we're friends trying to make a great movie together. And that
Yeah.
sense of camaraderie is I, which that turns me on. It's just like, it's it's some of the greatest professional experiences of my life have been with Jim Mangold, because of that feeling of camaraderie and family and this feeling that we're just a bunch of pals making a movie together. and it's fun. It's just there's nothing like it, and you can't have more fun at work.
I know we're at the end here now, and I usually ask what you have coming up next, but we already know you have The Residents coming up in 2025.
March.
Yep. Can't wait to see that on Netflix. And Francois, I can't thank you enough for your time here today talking about A Complete Unknown. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matthew. Thank you so much. Good luck with the article. I really, really appreciate it. It was great to chat with you.
Appreciate it.